Figures 3.9 and 3.10, placing a class in a separate file for reusability. Now, one problem with the way we've gone about creating the gradebook class in the prior examples is that it was contained in the same file with the main function. And in C++, you can only have one main function per program. If you try to compile a program that has more than one main function, you'll get a compilation error. Actually, you'll get a linker error in particular because it won't know which version of the main function to actually use. The way that a class typically gets reused is by including that class into other source code files. Well, if you include any of the previous versions of the gradebook class into other source code files using the #include directive, what's going to happen is you're not only going to get the gradebook class, but you're also going to get the main function, and that way you would wind up with multiple main functions and therefore not be able to create an executable application. So in this example, for the first time, we're going to split the gradebook class out of the main source code file and into a so-called header file. Class definitions typically appear in header files, and rather than include that code directly in the source code file that contains main, we're going to use a #include directive to get the definition of the gradebook class into the same source code file with main. That way we can include that header file in any application and reuse our gradebook class. So if you take a look at the gradebook header file, you'll see that it looks very similar to what we did in the previous example. We still have some #include directives for various things that we're using in the header file. And we have using statements as well for those items. And then we have our class gradebook, and there's the constructor that we just defined in the previous example, the set and get member functions, our display message member function, and our private data, the string called course name. And again, I'm just reiterating the fact that this semicolon is extremely important at the end of the class definition. That's what tells the compiler that the class definition is complete, and without it you will get compilation errors that are sometimes hard to figure out, especially in older compilers. So in any case, we have this gradebook header file, and we've placed it into the header files folder. Of course, we can add a new item when we're creating a class to the header files folder, and you can see there's different items we can add, such as header file. And if you were creating a class from scratch and you didn't want to take advantage of that add class capability that I showed you previously, you might instead create a header file and then later on create corresponding source code files. Now, in this example, the header file contains the complete class definition. In a subsequent example, we're going to start talking about separating what we call the interface of the class from the implementation of the class. So we'll get to that shortly. Now, in the figure310.cpp file, all we have now is the main function, and it's the same main function as the last program. However, we have to, before we can define gradebook variables in main, we have to include the gradebook class's definition. And the way that we do that is with a preprocessor #include directive. And notice that for the gradebook header file, we put it in double quotes, whereas for standard header files, we put them in angle brackets. And what this does is it tells the preprocessor to first look in this project for the header file's definition and be able to get that header file. If the header file is not in this project, then it would go search the standard directories where standard header files are included. So in fact, we could put double quotes around iostream and it will still find the iostream header file. However, if we put angle brackets around gradebook.h, it won't know what that header file is, and we will wind up with a compilation error. Now, I'm just going to go ahead and build this solution and show you that it still runs the same way. Actually, I had already built it before I did that command, which is why it didn't do anything. So if I now run the program, I can see the same exact output as the last program that we did in the previous video. Now, what I want to show you is what happens if we comment out this #include line. Now we're getting compilation errors showing up in the IDE. It says error identifier gradebook is undefined. And if I actually tell it to try to compile, I will get error messages all over the place. And you can see here that gradebook is an undeclared identifier in my fig0310.cpp file at line 13. So if I scroll down to line 13, you can see that's the first line where we're using the type name gradebook. Then also on line 13, we're getting a syntax error saying that there's a missing semicolon, and that's because it doesn't know what this identifier is. And in fact, we get a couple of different errors on line 13, a couple of different errors on line 14, and of course all of these errors that we're seeing here are because of the fact that it doesn't know what a gradebook is at the moment. And that's why it's so important that we first include the definition of the class before we try to use the class in a program. So again, the key purpose of this example was to show you separating the class from the client code, and that makes the class more reusable. We can now include that class into other programs and use it in those other programs.